This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And this week we return once again to the High Republic. It's been a minute. For a spoiler-free review of Cataclysm by Lydia Kang, the next book, the next adult novel in Phase 2 of the series. The last adult novel of Phase 2. Actually, there's only 2 waves in this phase. They are doing it for a reason. I'm not in charge. Lydia Kang, of course, is not new to writing Star Wars. She first wrote a short story in, from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back, but this is her full-length novel set in the Star Wars universe. And one thing I'll say right up front is, I'm so glad that she's joined the team of luminous authors crafting these stories. I'm convinced every High Republic book is better than the last, and that's due to the incredible work of so many people. From authors to editors, artists, and more. The High Republic is a living, breathing work of art, and it's books like Cataclysm that remind me just how true that is. So, without spoilers, here's my review of the book. If you haven't pre-ordered it already, you're definitely going to want to do that. After 5 years of conflict, the planets Aram and Arano are on the cusp of real peace. But when news breaks of a disaster at the treaty signing on Jedha, violence reignites on the worlds. Together, the royal heirs of both planets, Fontu Zen and Ziri Albaran, working alongside the Jedi, have uncovered evidence that the conflict is being orchestrated by outside forces, and all signs point to the mysterious path of the Open Hand, whom the Jedi also suspect of causing the disaster on Jedha. With time and answers in short supply, the Jedi must divide their focus between helping quell the renewed violence on Aram and Arano and investigating the path. Among them is Gela Natai, who turns to the one person she believes can unravel the mystery, but the last person she wants to trust, Axel Greylark. The Chancellor's son, imprisoned for his crimes, has always sought to unburden himself of the weight of his family name. Will he reconcile with the Jedi and aid in their quest for justice and peace? Or embrace the path's promise of true freedom? As all roads lead to Delma, Gela and her allies take on a force unlike any they've ever faced, and it will take all of their trust in the Force and in one another to survive. As someone who loved Convergence by Zoraida Cordova, this book was an exciting and seamless continuation of that story, picking up where the last book left off. I do highly recommend you listen to or read The Battle of Jedha before reading this book, but it is fairly short because it's an audio drama and it's 100% worth it. It really just catches you up on some important things going on in the galaxy that kind of drive the events of Cataclysm forward. One common criticism I hear of the books of the High Republic that there are just too many characters to keep track of, particularly in Light of the Jedi. It was a thing for people because all of them were new, and it was like, there are too many. And also, in addition to having to keep track of all of them, it's impossible to get attached to all of them. I mean, some of them you do, but one of many things Lydia Kang does well in Cataclysm is taking the time to really making you care about every single character. Does that make some events later on in the book hurt a little bit more? Sure, but I'm almost inclined to say it's worth it. That's a hard thing to do, is kind of balance so many characters and get readers to fully invest in each of their stories. But Cataclysm especially shines on that front. The book offers even more insight into how the Path of the Open Hand operates. And wow, if you didn't already hate them, don't worry. You're going to hate them a lot more after this. Star Wars is really leaning hard into its commentary on how bad cults are lately. They're very bad, in case you didn't already know. It's going to be really interesting to continue to see the connecting lines between the Path of the Open Hand and eventually we get the NTIL later on in the story, which is set later, but this is in the past. You get it. If you've read a High Republic book, hopefully you are on that page. Another thing that I briefly mentioned in my newsletter last week that I think is worth mentioning here is how well Lydia King's writing fits into the larger story the High Republic is telling. Obviously, Lydia brings her own voice and style to the characters and events, as each of these individual authors does in the stories that they tell. But it's still all one brilliant, cohesive story. As readers, we don't really get to see what goes on behind the scenes, the work that goes into making each of these stories unique, yet somehow seamlessly flow from one book to another, one story to another, despite different authors alternating between titles. That's the work of a stellar team of editors and writers, all in constant communication to make it happen. And the results really show through in the final product. It can't be easy to pass characters back and forth and maintain a consistent voice for each one. But they're doing it! It amazes me more and more as more of these books keep coming out. And they're not stopping. It's not stopping anytime soon. I don't have any insider knowledge on that. That's just, we know. Cataclysm, like so much else in the High Republic, is sad. It will upset you. War is always tragic. But also keep in mind that the Jedi are going up against a cult whose members are bred for fighting and violence. One of the Jedi's worst enemies, perhaps, isn't someone who taps into the dark side of the Force, but instead a group of people who genuinely believe the Force shouldn't be used at all. Interesting, isn't it? How this book perfectly captures the horrors of one group, loathing another simply for being who they are. Jedi don't ask to be Force sensitive. It's how they're born. It's embedded in who they know themselves to be. To hate someone for being who they are. To hate someone for not hurting anyone else by just existing. Star Wars is fiction, but it's such an important reflection of reality, isn't it? I can't say much more without starting to spoil things, because if I could talk about this book more in depth, I would. Just know that you're in for a truly special read, and I can't wait for you to finally get to devour the story. And don't worry, I've already booked a very special guest to talk more in depth with me about the story very soon. Until then, please enjoy the book, but try not to spoil it for other people, okay? Everyone reads at their own pace, and it's important to recognize and respect that. Thank you. Star Wars: The High Republic Cataclysm releases on April 4th, along with Quest for Planet X, wherever you get your Star Wars books. Pre-order if you haven't. It's very important that you do that. If you're planning on getting the book anyway, pre-order it, and it will come right to you eventually. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network and is written, produced, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on Twitter at Star Wars Lit Pod, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can support the show by starting a free Audible trial with the link in the description, or by subscribing to the Now This Is Lit newsletter. It's free. That was in parentheses in my notes, so I felt like I had to say it a certain way. I don't know. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.